Now, the Mishkan, when we came into the land, we were on Mount Ebal for 7 years. Is that right, or 9?
Right behind you.
Okay.
9 years in the wilderness, 27 years on Mount Ebal, 369 in Shiloh.
So Shiloh is where the red heifer project is. Shiloh is where they're moving all the red heifers when they take them up. Those they took from Texas, they took over to Israel, they put them in Shiloh. Now, what's funny about Shiloh, let's go back to that phrase in Genesis. A scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver between his feet until Shiloh comes. Maybe that's a phrase for something we never even thought before. Maybe that is where the sacrificial system, and it's right there in that promise of Judah until Shiloh comes. And so we may be on something really exciting right here. Shiloh is just north of Jerusalem. So let me find, okay, so here's Jerusalem, and Shiloh is just right up here. Somewhere in this area here. I'm not sure. Actually, you'll have to Google it on your phone. Because most maps, they don't put it on there because it's in a Palestinian area, and that's frustrating. They'll put the Palestinian names, but they won't put the Hebrew names if it's in a Palestinian area that they're trying to give back to the Palestinians. So anyways, Shiloh is in that area.
Probably won't bring any attention to it either.
Exactly.
Oh, you're not married?
Mary's right there, Beth.
I know, yeah. I'm so nervous to show it to Mary. And I look down, it's not Mary. I'm okay.
All right.
They weigh the exact weight and body fat and everything. I tested them yesterday. I think they are the same person.
The same person, just younger.
She's like, well, they're cute, but why are you showing this to me?
All right, so that's exciting to think that, because here's another deal. I don't know if you guys know this, but the rabbis have made it clear they won't use a red heifer that's over 3 years old. And the red heifer turned 2 back about 3 months ago. So if they don't use it this year for Passover, they've got up until, now some of them have said that the sacrificial system could start on the 9th of Av. I don't know. I think it should start at Passover, but I'm not there. So the 9th of Av, the temples were destroyed. So a lot of them believe that that would be the time to actually start the sacrificial system, for what it's worth. But regardless, Shiloh is definitely into the running. And here's the best part about it. If they did a red heifer sacrifice in Shiloh, they already own Shiloh. I mean, it ain't like they would have to fight with the Arabs for the Temple Mount to start the sacrificial system. So keep that in mind. And that's what David did the first time. David moved it from Shiloh to, actually, it moved to Shiloh, and then he went to Hebron. He had remember the guy that dropped over dead for touching the ark, and then they went into Jerusalem after David died. So there is a pattern there. Exactly how, we don't know. And for the record, I've never been right. So, we got that to factor in. But we're getting excited because I believe the sacrificial system starts everything. I believe that Yeshua, it'll even let us know soon he'll be here. Soon he'll return. And that's why the sacrificial system is so important to me. But anyway, let's get to our Torah portion. We're in...
Hey, real quick before you start that, I'm going to show everybody why I wrote this, though. So, Mishpatim is judgments. That's today. These are like how to love your brother. Commandments how you love your brother. So it's 479 in Gematria. Well, if you add up all the years of the tabernacle, all the way to the building the temple in Jerusalem, to the years of it, you get 479. So it's the same gematria as today. So how to love your brother is the years they had a physical dwelling place for Yah, was in a house. And then now it's gone. And then judgments, Rigo's math probably right on this. He said 74 or something. 72 to 76 total. So, but some of them are repeats. So even Kadba.org, here will tell you that there's 53 mitzvot in this, which is also the gematria for the Torah and for Yeshua. So, like today, the mitzvot in this one for these judgments, how to love your brother, like this is a specific one. There's also what? Elam and there's 3 different types of mitzvot, like ways to look at the laws, and this is one specific section. So for today, there's 53. So I just thought that was cool to put it up there.
Okay. Let's go to chapter 21 of Exodus, and I will do a blessing. Baruch atah Yah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Yah noten ha'Torah. Chapter 21. Now, if you got questions, raise your hand, because if you don't, you'll forget what you're going to say, and we want everybody to get involved. Who's reading first? Go, Ray.
These are the rulings that you are to present to them.
Stop. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
There was a lot in that first sentence right there. If you purchase a Hebrew slave, he is to work 6 years, but in the 7th, he is to be given his freedom without having to pay anything.
So, for 6 years, we're slaves, and the 7th year, we go free.
Hold that thought. Finish the paragraph. Get down to verse 7.
If he came single, he is to leave single. If he was married when he came, his wife is to go with him when he leaves. But if his master give him a wife, and she bore him sons or daughters, then the wife and her children will belong to her master, and he will leave by himself. Nevertheless, if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, so I don't want to go free, then his master is to bring him before God, and there at the door of the doorpost, his master is to pierce his ear with an awl, and the master will be his slave for life. If a man sells his daughter as a slave, she is not to go free like the manslave.
Stop. Okay. Now, 7 years. A servant is sold into slavery for 6 years. The 7th year he goes free. Now, that's if he's sold in on the first year. This is the sabbatical year. Every 7 years is a sabbatical year. And if you know, the way this, let's see. Let me draw this right here. Okay, then we got 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, 49, and then the following year is the 50th year. That's the Jubilee. Now, if a man is sold into slavery here, then, now, let's talk about slavery. Why were you sold into slavery? You couldn't file bankruptcy back then. You owed somebody money, you went to the court, you're going to pay this person, so you were sold into slavery to pay that debt. And you know, to be honest with you, that would be one thing that would stop people from just going out and buying all kind of junk today you don't need, because this is a serious deal. When you owed somebody, you paid them. And so that was number one why Hebrew servants were sold into slavery. And basically, it's kind of the same concept where the people came over in the New World here from Europe, and a lot of them, they would serve for so many years to pay for that trip over here. What do you call indentured servitude? Kind of that concept. Now, slaves in Scripture, what Rigo was talking about this morning is one thing we didn't discuss, is a slave in Scripture, if your servant fled and left you, you weren't allowed to go get him. Now, that changes everything, because here in America, the slavery we have is horrible. That wasn't what slavery was. If you beat your servant and he fled from you, you couldn't go get him. You just lost your money. So what did that teach you to do? You treat them, you were good to them. I mean, to a certain extent. They were basically your workers. So we're taking slavery and we're turning it around into something that's not what it was. We're talking about people, I don't know if you know this, but you're servants right now. You go buy your new vehicles, your new houses, and you're slaves to the system. You're servants to the system. You don't think you're slaves, you think you're free. Just like 2,000 years ago, Yeshua said that, this will set you free. They said, well, we're not slaves. Yes, they were. They were slaves to Rome. They served Rome. And we're the same way today. We're servants. When you owe, you're a servant to who you owe. So with that being said, right here.
But Paul even says that he's a slave to Messiah.
He was.
That's good, because another scripture says, to whom you submit yourself, that's the one you're a slave to. That's one of the reasons it's very important. You need to be very careful who you follow as your belief, because you become the slave of that.
Let's talk about the worship. Do you guys know what worship means? What the Hebrew word for worship is? avodah, to work. Now, wait a minute. I thought worship's when you got the guitars out and, No. Worship is when you work for a God. So when Miss Mary comes down here and she's cleaning the synagogue, she's worshiping Hashem. She's working for Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is lose your concept of what we think worship is. Worship is what Scripture says it is. Worship is when you work for a God. If you do anything specific to a God, you're worshiping that God. And now, Beth brought up something once back during the plagues. Those that worked for Pharaoh, those who were out in the fields, if they left them out in the fields, they all died. You need to be careful who you work for, because you're just as responsible as the people. You can't say, hey, I didn't know. I'm just working for them. No, that ain't good enough. He holds you just as accountable as what you do. So when you work for people that are evil, you work for a system that's corrupt and evil, you're just as guilty as they are. That's what we learned from the 10 plagues, that you're going to suffer the consequences of the people that you're working for. So it's important to understand that.
The other thing, I studied worship one time. I wanted to try and really get what it was, because it wasn't what the church had taught me. And I always saw bow in worship. So it was this submission and then the work. The submission and the work. Bow almost always went with the word worship.
I agree. Okay, now, this is something you don't really think about. When you go to the grocery store and you're buying your groceries and you're looking at an item, I've never seen this item before, so you're reading the ingredients on that item. In a way, you're worshiping God. You know why? You're trying to make sure you please Him by not buying stuff that we're not supposed to be eating regardless. And so even buying groceries, you set apart your God. And so it's important when you understand what worship really means to apply it all the way around. Yes, it is bowing, but it can be much more than that. Now, if you're sold into slavery right here, you come out on the sabbatical year. What day of the sabbatical year? It's very important. If you were a servant and you were sold into slavery, you want to come out at the beginning of that year or the end of that year? What day are you set free? You're set free on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets. Now, Yom Kippur is a different year. Now, we just read about a guy that put his ear to the door. Okay, and it says, this guy will serve you forever. Now, let me paint the scene for you. So this guy, I'm sold into slavery, and I'm not married, I don't have any wife or children, and my master, the guy that I'm serving, he's got this real cute maidservant, and he said, you want to take her for a wife? I'm like, she's cute, okay, I'll take her. Now here's the problem. If I can come out in the 7th year, but I have to leave her there, or I go through this process where I say, no, man, I'm married her, and we got children, and I want her to be my wife forever. So then I go to the court, I state my situation, and they take me to the guy's doorpost, and they put it all through my ear, which symbolizes, this way I don't forget, I belong to this guy forever, not forever. This is the word le'olam. It means a specific amount of time. Now in Christianity, forever means forever, right? But here it doesn't mean forever. It means a specific amount of time. When can I go free? If I put my ear to that door, when do I get to go free? Ever? Yes. I get to go free on the Jubilee, but not Rosh Hashanah. On the Jubilee, I go free on the 10th day of the Jubilee on Yom Kippur. So that's what you said a while ago when you said Yom Kippur. Yes. So the servant that goes free in the 50th year goes free on Yom Kippur. The one that goes free in the sabbatical year, he goes free on Rosh Hashanah, the day of Rosh Hashanah. Sherry. Okay?
So female slaves are never set free?
They're set through the same way.
But hold on. A female slave, and this is something that Rigo pointed out this morning. They said you would treat them as a daughter. They're being like usually the female slaves, very seldom. But when somebody was in debt, that was usually the husband, the male. He was sold into slavery. The wives usually didn't go into slavery unless it was a man that was selling his daughter. And But what they were selling them for was something different. He's talking to this man, and he's going to raise her up and be a wife to his child, to his son. And most of the time, the daughters, that's the situation with the daughters. They're young, they're sold to this guy, and he's raising her up as his daughter, and then later on, she's going to marry his son. And so, literally, it's actually like a betrothal. It's more of a betrothal than it was slavery.
There's also a way to bring the poor and the rich together. So, like, if you're a poor man at 5 years old, you could sell your daughter to a rich man of your choosing. You could pick the household and everything.
Even the daughter has a choice.
And you'd be like, I want my daughter to come into your household. You raise her up, and you have basically 6 years to make a decision to either take her as a wife for yourself or your son. And if not, we're about to read, is evil in the eyes of if you don't do it. But that person becomes a part of the household, and then your two families join together. Unlike today, like if, the poor stay poor and they marry poor people, the rich, they all go to Harvard and Yale and they marry rich people. There's no real bringing those two households together. This will bring
He's right about that. That was the main purpose of it. And, we're so stuck with our idea of slavery that we kind of lose concept of what it's actually about. Nicole.
he could buy her back for a third of the price.
Now, here's one thing you got to understand. Any betrothal, I know Judaism today is this way, any betrothal, the daughter has a choice. It's not like she doesn't have a choice. And if she chooses no, then that's it. She don't have to go through with it. But the daughter always has a choice.
Okay, now the spiritual aspect.
Okay?
We are being raised in the Master's house to become the bride.
In effect, that we follow, if Yeshua chooses to take us as part of the bride. That's a good point. Very good point. Now,
The female slave.
in spirituality concept. Okay, now watch this. Now that's right here. Now, let's say that I'm sold into slavery. Everything is on a 50-year cycle. That Jubilee cycle is very important. In Israel, you're farming, everything. You knew what year of the Jubilee it was. And so let's say down here in the year 36, let's say 42. 43, right here, I'm sold into slavery. And my master gives me this same young girl. I say, okay, I want to marry her. Now, I go to right here, the 49th year, I should be set free. But now I can say, well, I can wait one more year and take my wife with me and my children. So it depends on where you're at in this 50-year cycle, whether or not you want to take that woman. If she's really pretty and you want to marry her, and you're way up here, you got 49 more years to the Jubilee, you got a long time to wait. But if you're right here in the middle, you can decide, okay, I'll take her as a wife, and I'll have to stay with my master for maybe 20 more years to the Jubilee, but then I get to go out free with my wife and my children. But it all comes down to the Jubilee. The same thing with the crops. If you buy land, you're not buying the land, you're buying the number of crops that land will produce. That's very important to understand. So in Israel, if you buy land right here in the 29th year, you've got, 7, 14, you got 15 years of crops that you can buy. That's what you're buying. You're buying 15 years of crops because you can't plan on this year and you can't plan on Jubilee year. So it's very important to, wipe away our mindset of what we think, what we've been taught in Christianity. And important to go back and look what Hashem says straight from the Torah. And so it all comes down to this 50-year cycle. That's what this person here puts his ear through the door. And it says forever, but it's not forever. And there's another verse later on, we talk about the Jubilee. It names the people that can go out in the Jubilee. And then it said, but there are Canaanite slaves outside, those you can keep perpetually forever. And that means that you just pass them down to your children, to their children. But Rigo made an interesting point earlier, and when we were talking about this, the whole idea, and the rabbis today will disagree, and they'll say, no, that's not what this is about. But I disagree. I say it is what it is about. If you were a Canaanite servant, and you were being passed down, you were serving in Israel, and you know, when your master died, his children took you over, blah, blah, blah. All you had to do was convert. And that puts a stop at the end of it. Once you convert, now you're a Hebrew slave. You go free in the sabbatical year. Now, the rabbis would avoid that, and back then they would probably avoid it too. They didn't want their servants to know that. But all they had to do was take upon, like with Ruth, your God is my God, your people are my people, and convert and become one of the people. And now you get to go free during the sabbatical. And so there was always a way out. Now, there's a story when we get into in Deuteronomy, I think. It says that if you have servants, slaves, and they flee from you, you're not allowed to go get them. Well, there's a story with King Solomon. King Solomon, when David died, there was this guy that made fun of David. When David had to flee from Absalom, and this guy was screaming at him, mocking him. And then when David came back, the guy's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Because he thought David was finished, and David wasn't finished. Then he became king again. And so this guy apologized, and David said, forget it, let it go. But he told Solomon, he said, you keep an eye on him. He's dangerous. And Solomon called him to the king's throne, to come before him. And Solomon said, listen, you mocked my dad. You made fun of my dad. You're going to make a vow right now. If you ever leave Jerusalem, you're going to die. And he says, okay, I promise I'll never leave Jerusalem. Hashem, God made 2 of his servants flee from him. Torah says, don't go get your servants. He went to the next town to get his servants that fled from him. So he broke Torah, but it cost him his life because of the vow he made to Solomon. Now think about that. That's such a neat story to realize that Torah says, don't go after your servants if they flee. So that means you got to treat them respectfully but he did. But not just he broke the vow. Solomon said, if you leave Jerusalem, it's your death. And I guess he already knew that the guy somehow was going to, God was going to make it happen, but he did. The guy went to get his servants and he was put to death. So all through the Tanakh, there are stories to prove the Torah in one way or another, and that's what's beautiful about it. Okay, so any questions about this guy now that puts his ear to the door? The whole purpose of that. It's to say that you belong to this person until the Jubilee, an appointed amount of time. Sherry.
This whole thing about the bondservant is extremely important, and you understand how important it is when you read the New Testament, because they call themselves a bondservant. They were different than just saved. And then you go to Revelation, and it says, this is written to the bondservant, no one else.
Never thought about that.
No one else except the bondservant.
I never thought about that.
It's not meant to scare the world.
And we're bondservants of Yeshua.
Exactly. And why should we know about something at the end if we're not going to be a part of it? So it tells you that the bondservant has a part in what's happening.
Okay. On top of that, then, look at this. Leaving Egypt. Hashem came down, Elohim came down and destroyed all the gods of Egypt because the people belong to Egypt. And we belong to Yeshua. And so the same concept of just...
He shows himself strong through what he does for those people in the midst of judgment.
That's cool. I never thought about that.
God just take out everybody that follows him and then just beat the world to a pulp with judgment. That's not the point. The point is to show that he's God, and he does that through what he does with his people.
Many Christians think that, that Revelation, that they have a different concept of Revelation and understanding, not much of it. And they're not the bond servants. Even if they think that they were going to try to go through this thing, and if they're not within a certain group, they're going to go through the wrath. So, because it's for the bond servants. It's not for anybody. And when you look at the definition of the bond servant, it's the Messianics. It's the people
It
that
is.
follow Torah and follow the commandments.
They stay in the house of the Father.
Okay, now think about this. So
Stay in the Father's house.
what you're talking about, we also have a pattern of the king throwing a wedding for his son. And it said, those who were chosen, blah, blah, blah. They didn't come, blah, blah, blah. And so we're all looking at that story. It said, then he opened up the highways and brought everybody in. And there was one that didn't have wedding garments. He was cast into outer darkness. But no matter how we look at that, they're not the bride. They're all, the king so he raised up a bondservant, and his son is taking that bondservant as part of his bride. So the whole thing I've been trying to get people to understand about the king's wedding in the New Testament is anybody can come to the wedding, but not everybody's the bride. And with that concept, that's why I always, I've always had this ideal that the bride has to walk in Torah. The bride, that Torah is a ketubah, a wedding contract, but not everybody has to do that. There are a lot of guests at the wedding that are good people that are just guests at the wedding.
That's their choice. Because Yeshua also said, those who keep Torah and teach others to keep Torah will be the greatest in the kingdom, and those who don't will be the least.
And there's the wedding, there's the bride.
And some people don't remember as a Christian, I just want my little cabin in the corner of heaven. Well, you know what? Be the least if you choose.
Good point. Good point. You started all this, you know that, right? With your whole spirituality thing. Okay, so that's a really, really good point. So when you look at it from that perspective, we are Yeshua's bond servants, or the fathers.
Discussion with my brother because he's not Messianic. And I brought out the bondservant. I said, you better go and study what that really meant. Because you keep telling me how you're set free. And that's true. I said, but the bondservant takes a different path. Even though he's set free, he says, I love my master. I'm going to stay in my master's house. I'm going to be a part of my master's.
And I will say with him until a specific amount of time. Exactly. And this concept here is the Jubilee, but our concept is when we enter into the land, and we're part of that. Absolutely. That's beautiful. Okay, so you understand the 7-year sabbatical cycles all the way down to the Jubilee. We all understand that? You understand at what point you're sold into slavery, you have to stay. Now remember, Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the 7th month of the 7th year, is when all servants go free. Yom Kippur, on the Jubilee year, is the first day that's the day when servants go free in the Jubilee year. Now, in Ezekiel chapter 40, 39 or 40, it says the beginning of the year, it says Rosh Hashanah, and it said the 10th day of Tishri. That was a Jubilee. So when you start understanding the concept, then you can spot when King James says it was the beginning of the year, and then it says it was the 10th of Tishri. Rosh Hashanah on in the Jubilee year, Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year. And people say, well, Rosh Hashanah is not in Scripture. It is in the Tanakh. The word Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, and it says that year was the 10th of the 7th month. That was the Jubilee year. Because that's the argument the rabbis have been in forever is, does the Jubilee year start on Rosh Hashanah or does it start on Yom Kippur? Now, get a load of this. How long was the flood on the earth?
365 days or 300?
1 year and 10 days. Now, why is that important? Because the 7th sabbatical is 1 year. The slaves were set free on Rosh Hashanah in the 49th year, but the other slaves were set free on the 10th day of the 50th year. So you got 1 year and 10 days. What I'm trying to say, is there a comparison? If you're trying to look at the beginning of the flood and now what's going on, is it going to fall in the 49th and 50th year? Is that when it's all going to hit? I'm just asking a question because you got 1 year and 10 days. And the water was upon the world for 1 year and 10 days. Something to think about. Okay, let's get down to
Verse 7, I'm going to read
verse
it again.
7.
I'm so slow, I'm sorry. I'll try to speed up a little bit. If a man sells his daughter as a slave, she is not to go free like the men slaves. If her master married her but decides she no longer pleases him, then he is to allow her to be redeemed. He is not allowed to sell her to a foreign people because he has treated her unfairly. If he has her marry his son, then he is to treat her like a daughter. If he marries another wife, he is not to reduce her food, clothing, or marital rights. If he fails to provide her with these 3 things, she is to be given her freedom without having to pay anything. Whoever attacks a person and causes his death must be put to death. If it was not premeditated, but an act of Yah, then I will designate for you a place to which he can flee.
Stop a minute. Any questions about the daughter? I can't really explain any more than what we've already talked about. Let's take a second. Why would a daughter be sold into slavery? Think about that. Could she? I mean, any financial things went through the husband, did it not?
I would think that she agreed to the situation to help her father out of a bad situation. I wouldn't think a father would do that without her.
So, well, you
No, it's just finished.
So the father couldn't pay for the bride price for her, and he knew that things weren't looking good in his future. Couldn't even put food on the table. Then he needs to find a way to find a family to take care of her.
But the bride price, from what I understand reading the Talmud, the bride price was put into a special account that belonged to the bride.
Right. But I mean,
It was her money.
If he can't put money into an account for his daughter, so one day she can marry off into a nice family, then he has to find a man that will take her in and provide. Like, he can't even provide for her in general, much less get a bride price together for her. So he has to sell her off to another family to look after her, and then by the age 12, he has to make a decision whether to take her in forever or to sell her back to the father or give her to another household that she can pick. So she can go to another man that will buy her from him, but the father gets first choice to buy her back.
Now, from what I understand, all through the writings, the daughter has a say in all this whole matter. It's not like she's just sold out from under.
Right, yeah, he picks a suitable person. But they're usually really young. I don't know how.
Well, now, let's look at it from a different angle. You know what the purpose of betrothing a young girl is compared to not betrothing a young girl? If someone is, I hate to say this phrase, but raped, if she's betrothed, that's a death penalty. You guys realize that? She's not with her husband. So let's go back in those days and you wanted to protect your daughter, and you had these two families growing up, and the daughter was like, she's old enough to make a decision. She's like this young guy, and so you want to be his bride, blah, blah, blah. They betrothed them at early ages. And the reason they did that is if the daughter ever got molested or anything like that, raped, then that was a death penalty to the person that did it to her. Now, if she wasn't betrothed, it was a different situation. Now, I do want to talk about something else we talked about this morning. Sometimes it's like divorce. Yeshua said it wasn't God's will that any should get the divorce, but we did it out of the hardness of your heart. So I do want to say that I think sometimes slavery is taken out of context, but it don't mean that sometimes he gives us laws on things that we're already doing. You understand what I'm saying? And so did he permit it? Did he will it? Did he permit it? I'm not going to go that far, but I'm saying because we were doing it, then these are the rules you're going to abide by. Because that's kind of with the divorce. He had no intention for us getting divorced, but he knew the hardness of our heart, he'd give us divorce. And so that men wouldn't have their wives, killed by accident or whatever, they could just divorce them. But anyway.
Why nail the man's ear to the doorpost?
Well, it's,
They put an earring in it afterwards to show that he had made that decision.
Like a cow tag?
Well, we have something we nail to our doorpost. Like, is it
Mezuzah.
representing, like us putting our ear to the Shema, the mezuzah, and being like that's unusual to me because we have something we actually nail to our doorpost, and then there's this command.
maybe it's a symbolism of saying, you don't forget. We're going to do this because you're not going to forget. You belong to this person, and we're going to make sure you feel the pain because you belong to them.
This is your
This is your house.
house.
You made the decision. It wasn't, you had a choice. Now you made that decision. Now you're going to stay here, and that's the purpose of it. Because you couldn't go, well, let's look at it from a different angle. Could you go 5 years and then change your mind and say, okay, I want to divorce her anyways, I'm leaving? No. At that point, you're there. And so that would change everything. Right here and then right here.
Well, the scientists say that the reason why the ear is here permanently marked, it is the ear that heard the commands at Mount Sinai, and you are not to have a human master that is God. God is our master in whom we serve. So it's to remember the commands
remember this command that you've now dedicated yourself for 49 years, maybe, or whatever, until
Yeah.
the Jubilee.
Shema means hear and do.
Right.
Kind of like a high-end escrow.
I'm sorry.
Kind of like a high-end escrow.
Psalm 40, verses 6 through 8 says, Sacrifice and offerings you did not desire. My ears you have opened. Burnt offerings, which are Olah, and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, Behold, I come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me, I delight to do your will, O God, and your law is written within my heart.
Okay.
What psalm was that?
Okay. Anything else?
So Yeshua says he's the door.
No one else can enter. Okay, so, yeah.
So if you're putting your ear to the door, Yeshua,
Should be able to hear him real good, huh?
you should be able to shema what he's saying.
Okay, go. Verse.
Verse 14. But if someone willfully kills another after deliberate planning, you are to take him even from my altar and put him to death. Whoever attacks his father or mother must be put to death. Whoever kidnaps someone must be put to death, regardless of whether he has already sold him or the person is found still in his possession. Whoever curses his father or mother must be put to death. If two people fight and the one hits the other with a stone or with his fist, and the injured party doesn't die but is confined to his bed, then if he recovers enough to be able to walk around outside, even if with a cane, the attacker will be free of liability, except to compensate him for his loss of time and take responsibility for his care until his recovery is complete. If a person beats his male or female slave with
Stop for a second, stop for a second. Okay, so there's the story of Solomon. Solomon had his uncle, Joab. Joab was the captain of David's guard. Joab killed a man in innocent blood. When they was fighting against Abner, then David declared peace, Abner surrendered, and then Joab killed him. And David said, one day, you make sure he dies. He killed a man in peacetime. War is different, but in peacetime, no, now Joab's got to die. And so Joab, when David died, now this was David's sister's son that was head of David's army. Joab is spelled Joab in the King James. He goes and grabs the altar. And Benaiah comes up, and Benaiah goes, Solomon says, go kill him. And he says, King, O king, your honors Solomon. He said, he's grabbed the altar. He said, kill him right there and then drag him away from the altar. And so here it said, in this verse right here that we just read, take him from my altar that he be put to death. And so that's what Joab was guilty of, was murder with guile even, because he intended to kill Abner. It was really the way he did it. He had full intention of killing Abner. From my altar you shall take him to die. Now, he wouldn't let go of the altar, and that was Benaiah's question. He says, Solomon, what'd I do? I mean, you told me to kill him. I'll pull him from the altar and kill him, but I can't get it. If I pull him, he's going to tear the altar up. What do I do? He said, just kill him there and then drag him off. And he did.
So why do you think it's coming up here? I agree with that 100%, but this,
Because he already knew it was going to happen.
that or like there has to be something in the past that made Moshe afraid, because everything else here seems to be a situation that's already happened, and this is commentary on.
Maybe it's just trying to cover every situation. He knows it's going to happen. Oh, it's like even the drawers, the hewer of woods and the drawer of water. He already knew that was going to happen, so he prophesied in here. Even those people were supposed to do certain things. So he was just getting everybody ready, even though, and actually maybe it's this. Maybe it shows you that when it does happen, he already knew it was going to happen. I think that's the key. So he already knew this deal Solomon was going to go through. And he even says, if you murder somebody with guile, and that's exactly what Joab did, because he knew he wasn't supposed to do it, but he did it anyways. And
The
so,
verse that made me ask is the temple the sanctuary city? Like, is it what you say it wasn't part of the sanctuary city, but people seem to go to it and take sanctuary on the altar like it was, and it says, but if you committed murder, it won't be for you. But
What were the sanctuary cities in there? Hebron was one. Shechem was the other one. Was it Shechem, Hebron, and Kadosh in northern Israel? There were 3 inside and 3 outside.
right, it never mentions it, but it seems like it is in a sense. You're
Yeah.
right. I think you're right because I looked it up after I asked.
It wasn't, you're right, it wasn't a sanctuary city. But Hebron was.
But
I
it
think
seems like
Hebron
the
was.
altar is a sanctuary. If you can grab hold of it, and if you were not first-degree murder, then if it was an accident, it's a place you could take refuge. But this is saying if it's first degree, we'll take.
Whoa. First of all, how are they going to get close enough to the altar? In Solomon's temple, they couldn't even come in. Okay, let's look at this. Now, we may be onto something, but in that one, they could get up close to the outside altar. They couldn't go inside. If you got this outside altar right here, inside you got a golden altar. If they grabbed this, the people were around this, not just the priest. Now, this is the Mishkan. When we went to the temple, you got the altar right here, the outside altar. They couldn't go in the inside. If anybody tried to go inside and they weren't a priest, they were put to death immediately. So if they went to the outside altar, they're not even allowed to enter this one in Solomon's temple. But Solomon hadn't built the temple when Joab went up and grabbed it. That was at the beginning of his reign. So anyway, but yeah, you have to factor in the fact that you couldn't even get close to the altar, you'd be put to death. Okay. Let's go. Verse
20.
Okay.
If a person beats his male or female slave with a stick so severely that he dies, he is to be punished, except that if the slave lives for a day or two, he is not to be punished since the slave is his property.
Stop a minute. Let's go back to verse 18. If men quarrel and one strikes another with a stone or with his fist and he does not die but falls into bed, if he gets up and goes outside under his own power, then the one who struck him is absolved. For only the lost time shall he pay. You got to understand that the phrase eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that is compensation. You don't go and put somebody else's eye out if you get your eye put out. Every body part is worth a specific amount of money. And when you think about it like this, Linda worked for Levi's, and her job was somebody got hurt, that's what her job was, to make sure, it was legit, make sure they got hurt on the job. And every single body part, it's worth a specific amount of money. People would actually, can't imagine this, somebody cut off a finger or something just because they need money, and they blame it on did you ever see anything like that happen? You said one time y'all caught somebody doing something to get money. Anyway, I know you can't talk about it, but my point is that eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that's been taken way out of context. We're talking about compensation. In the Torah, if me and Ray get into it and he pushes me and I lose an eye, we don't take his eye out in retaliation. That's not what happens. He's got to pay till I get up better, where I can get around and stuff. So it's just like insurance today. It's about compensation. But it's all based on his law telling us how to deal with each other. And you got to remember, we just came out of Egypt, and now we're a new nation. We're forming a new government, and he's given us our Constitution. That's what the Torah is. It's our Constitution. Okay, go.
Verse 22. If people are fighting with each other and happen to hurt a pregnant woman so badly that her unborn child dies, then, even if no other harm follows, he must be fined. He must pay the amount set by the woman's husband and confirmed by judges. But if any harm follows, then you are to give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, and bruise for bruise.
When you read that, it sounds, how many of our brothers and sisters in the Sunday world have told us, oh man, back then they, put out each other's eyes, blah, 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 and that's not what happened.
But that would be exacting revenge. That wouldn't be compensation. Like, okay, you hurt my eye, so I'm going to hurt your eye. That's not a way to love somebody.
No.
Well, it is, to
No.
your point, it's no way of being compensated for what happened to you. Then you're exactly right. It is only revenge, and that is never something that the Torah teaches us to have in our hearts.
Now,
They said the whole
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, now here's one that is taken way out of context. If two men will fight and they collide with the pregnant woman and she miscarries. So a lot of the abortion in Israel, they use this verse, say, well, a baby's life is not worth as much as the mother's life. And so they use that, they take it out of context, and we're not talking about intentional here. We're not talking about an intentional miscarriage, intentional abortion. That's not what they're talking about. If two men are fighting and there's an accident, or if you're in a car wreck, let's apply it, not fighting with somebody. Let's say you're driving your vehicle and you hit a pregnant woman and she loses that child. That could be a death penalty under some circumstances, but here he's saying it's not. You didn't intentionally try to hurt her. Now, if you rammed her intentionally, that's a different situation. Then the court's going to prove the same thing.
How do you know she was pregnant? You didn't know she was pregnant.
You didn't know she's pregnant, exactly. But if you did know she was pregnant and you did hit her with intention, now that's murder. That's a different situation. And the court's going to find that out. But you can't use this, and they do. They use this verse to push abortion. That, well, the child's life not worth as much as the mother's life. And I can't go down that road. I don't think it has any, I think it's taken out of context. And, I mean, but now, anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because that's something a lot of people do. Okay, verse.
We're in 26, but I'm going to read this commentary just to kind of add to what you were saying or to support it. It says, the Hebrew idiom life for life, nefesh tahat nefesh, was always interpreted to mean that the financial burden caused by the attacker fully becomes his responsibility. The attacker was responsible for medical recovery, wages lost, projected wages lost, and for suffering endured.
Okay.
All right, so we're in verse 26.
Okay.
If a person hits his male or female slave's eye and destroys it, he must let him go free in compensation for his eye. If he knocks out his male or female slave's tooth, he must let him go free in compensation for his tooth. If an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox is to be stoned and its flesh not eaten, but the owner of the ox will have no further liability. However, if the ox was in the habit of goring in the past, and the owner was warned but did not confine it, so that it ended up killing a man or woman, then the ox is to be stoned, and its owner, too, is to be put to death. However, a ransom may be imposed on him, and the death penalty will be commuted if he pays the amount imposed. If the ox gores a son or daughter, the same rule applies. If the ox gores a male or female slave, its owner must give their master 12 ounces of silver, and the ox is to be stoned to death.
Stop a minute. Okay, so let's back up just for a second. Okay, so what if your servant's got false teeth and you give him a right hook and he loses his teeth? Do you get to go free?
No, because they're not real.
They weren't real teeth, they were false. Okay, I'm just challenging you. Okay, so now,
You can just pick them up and put them back in.
oh, you knocked my teeth out, I get to go free. Come on, that's funny. Yeah. Okay.
Coming out.
Yeah, I don't know funny.
I do know funny. I'm catching on.
This is a question I never thought to ask before. So you've got a situation where the ox has been proven to be dangerous and you're responsible. Does this apply to any animal that you own?
Okay,
Is it dangerous?
yes, because let's look at this right here. Okay, so you got a dog. Your dog bites somebody, and you know your dog has bitten somebody in the past. And now, imagine a child comes in and it bites that child, and it hurts that child, kills that child. You're responsible.
Especially because you knew he's already done it before.
Yeah.
And it's a dangerous dog and you shouldn't have him around people if he's going to bite him.
Now, that's the worst thing with people's pets. Sometimes with people's pets, people turn a blind eye all the time. Say, oh, my dog wouldn't do that. Yes, he would, because I heard him growl. I heard him do this, heard him do that. And so now let's talk about Free Willy. Remember the big killer whale?
Yes, I remember free.
You know that thing has killed people in captivity. Now, first of all, they shouldn't have it in captivity. But there's one of them down there, one of them killer whales that I killed somebody a couple years ago, killed another person. And what do you do about that? According to Torah, the owner should be put to death and the animal should be put to death. But in another way, it's not even the animal's fault if it was out to sea where it should be. You know, you keep an animal. I had a horse one time I was keeping up in a stall all the time, And that was the meanest thing I ever seen in my life. But once I turned him loose, he was as gentle as a kitten. But when I had him up in a stall, look, he'd grab me sometimes and bite my overalls and sling me around. He's a mean rascal. And then I realized one day, well, it's my fault I'm keeping him pinned up. So I turned him loose, and I didn't have any more trouble out of that horse. So what I'm trying to say is, who's responsible in that situation? I wouldn't even want to be a judge in that situation. Because the animal, according to Torah, should be put to death because it did kill somebody. But the person sneaked in the middle of the night into the enclosure. One of them was drunk and actually swimming in the enclosure with the animal. So what do you do in a situation like that? Ain't you glad you ain't a judge?
I think in both situations it's pointing to, do you love your brother more than you love even your pet? And do you love your animals enough that you don't cause them to be abused?
And right there, she just hit it more than anything. People today love their animals more than they love their brothers and sisters. Now, I'm not saying if you got an animal, be mean to them. That's not what I'm saying. There are too many people out there that their animals mean more to them than a brother or sister. And if you got an animal that hurts a brother or sister, your dog don't hurt nobody. Yeah, I know. We know that. So,
I mean, Colonel Sanders, but he might not live.
now,
One more time, and I'm gonna bop that chicken on the head, okay?
now,
I remember an animal that hurt people.
Bart, but he's gone.
now, my dog will kill a hot dog in 3 seconds. I'm telling you, it's vicious. All 3 pounds of it. But
When you abuse your animal, it also shows that you love yourself
More than you love your animal. Yes.
yeah,
So all of it comes down to an impure heart, impure attitude.
exactly. And we have to remind each other sometimes and say, I know you love your animals, but what about human people? People. Do you love your brothers and sisters? That's the key to everything. That's what you should have taught it. And I'm glad you brought that up, Sherry, because that's a great point. So think about that. Now, you got an animal that has bit somebody, hurt them, and now later on they kill a child. You are responsible for that. And I know the laws of America are the same way. You got to say you're raising this pit bull that's viciously attacked somebody, and you don't do something to it, and it viciously attacks somebody else. Now you're guilty. And this is one of the few places in Scripture where you can actually be ransomed. You guys realize that? If your animal attacks somebody and kills somebody, if the person, their relatives, come out and say, well, you pay this amount, blah, 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 and won't have you put that, you can actually be ransomed from this one, but no other place. This is one of the few places you could actually be ransomed from. Because we just read that. Okay, let's go down.
Verse 33. I'm still reading. If someone removes the cover from a cistern or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or donkey falls in, the owner of the cistern must make good the loss by compensating the animal's owner, but the dead animal will be his. If one person's ox hurts another's so that it dies, they are to sell the live ox and divide the revenue from the sale, and they are to also divide the dead animal. But if it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring in the past, and the owner did not confine it, he must pay ox for ox, but the dead animal will be his. If someone steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters or sells it, he is to pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. That's the end of 21.
Okay, you finished it? Okay. Look at that, though. The prices.
Exponential restoration.
He shall pay 5 cattle in place of the ox, or 4 sheep in place of the sheep. You know, it could get expensive. You steal something, you got caught with it. Ooh.
Still 10,
Yeah, you
10,
have to
10
give
sheep,
a lot more back.
10 ox.
Is that ox safe to eat?
I'm sorry?
Would that ox be safe to eat?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Even though it wasn't slaughtered like kosher?
It was just killed.
Well, or you could sell it to, today's vernacular, they probably sell it to a Gentile,
Right.
but,
Because it wasn't like bled out or anything.
well, I guess it might depend on how it died.
Yeah,
It might
that
be
too,
bled
yes.
out.
Is
Yeah.
what I, more what I meant.
It might be naturally bled out, so, I don't know.
Yeah. That's why I was like, that's a really good question.
Okay.
Probably a kosher butcher would come look at it and
All right, chapter 22. Go.
I'm going to read.
Go, Mary.
If a man shall steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief be found breaking up and be smitten that he die, there shall be no blood be shed before him, or no blood be shed for him. If the sun be risen up on him, there shall be blood shed for him, for he should make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he should be sold for his theft. If the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or ass or sheep, he shall restore double.
Stop a minute. So if a man is tunneling in and he's struck and dies, there's no blood guilt on him unless the sun is shined upon him. Now, what is that? What do you mean?
I had epiphany while we were reading this morning.
So if somebody is breaking in your house and it's nighttime, you can't see them, and you kill them, there's no blood guilt upon you. But if it's in the daytime and you can see them during the daytime, then right here first. Go ahead.
Does it kind of have to do with, I think it was Joshua who did it. He hung people, but they couldn't stay there until the next day when the sun rose. They had to be hung and then brought down before sunrise.
Okay.
I think it has to do with what their intent was. If they're breaking into your house at night, chances are you're home asleep and you're vulnerable. But if they're breaking in during the day,
They think you're out working.
you to be out working, not at home, whatever, and they were just in after your stuff. And there's a big difference between being after your stuff and being after your life.
Because if you're there, if they break in at night, they could kill you. They're planning on killing. They could. Exactly. But in the daytime, they wouldn't expect anybody to be there. Or they wouldn't be breaking in. That makes a lot of sense. So that's okay. Go.
If a man shall cause a field or vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field, of the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard shall he make restitution. If fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of grain or the standing grain or the field be consumed therewith, that he that kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to guard, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges to see whether he have put his hand into his neighbor's goods. For all manner of transgression, whether it be for ox, for ass, for sheep, for raiment, or for any matter of lost thing, which another challenges to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whom the judges shall condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to guard it, and it die, or be hurt, or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of Yah be put between them both, and he has not put his hand unto his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good, and he shall not make it good. And if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof. If it be torn into pieces, then let him bring it for witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn. If a man borrow aught of his neighbor, it be hurt or die, or the owner thereof being not with it, he shall surely make it good. But if the owner thereof be with it, he shall not make it good. If it be a hired thing, it came for his hire.
Sophomore, back up in verse 8. It says, to the court shall come both their claims. The word court here is Elohim. Now think about this a minute. A lot of people translate Elohim as judges. Elohim, that means God. Bring them before Elohim. Bring them before the court. Bring them before the judges. Now think about that for a second. But it's saying bring them before Elohim. Now the court passes the judgment of Elohim. I understand that, but the court's not Elohim. So what does it mean, bring them before Elohim? Because there's several places, especially in the KJV, when you're looking up the word judges, lots of times it's Elohim. Bring them before Elohim. Then we go down to the verse down here, and it says, if you give something, if I give Patrick something to keep for me, and it gets stolen from him, then he goes before Elohim and he makes a vow, I didn't take anything, and I have to accept that. And but he's making that vow to Yah, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And so the context here is the judges pass the judgment of Elohim. The judgment they pass is Elohim's judgment. But at the same time, they need to understand how important this is. They literally, they're standing in the place of Elohim, and they're passing judgment here to the defendants. You understand what I'm saying? But it says Elohim. It doesn't say the judges, the mishpat. It's Elohim, clearly. Okay, now, you go rent a backhoe. You rent it from your buddy. He's got his backhoe, and he's not a business, blah, blah, blah. And you take the backhoe up to your house, you're digging, and you blow the engine up. If you hire him to come over and he blows the engine up, then it's his responsibility. If you borrow your neighbor's tractor and you blow the engine up because you didn't know how to run it, now we're getting to the gray area. If you rent it from one of the rental places, and they got insurance, most of them, for something like that. But I'm not even sure in a situation like that if,
We still make you pay for it if it was.
if you blew it up, you're responsible.
Found that they didn't change the oil, they didn't check the oil, that they didn't operate it correctly, they're going to pay for it.
And that's what it says right here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't there also a Torah to replace something?
I'm sorry?
It's like if you broke something, you were to replace it with equal amount,
Or
or
financially, whether you replace it or give them the money what it's worth. And so, now you got to remember something, like an old backhoe is going to depreciate anyways. It's not going to be worth the price it was when it was new. So you have to depreciate what it was worth at the time that they destroyed it. And you work in the rental, so.
You've got to pay value of what it costs to replace it.
Really? Is that in the contract when they sign it?
Yeah, so when you sign that contract, it says that you have to pay the replacement value. Now there's some wiggle room, but more than likely it's going to be replacement value because
Okay.
you can't go out and buy another piece of equipment
Gotcha.
for the price of what you're going to give us for that.
Gotcha.
I just found out this week that insurance companies, they have to like pay a depreciation value after your car gets wrecked or gets fixed. They have to send you a check, like if now that it's been wrecked and it's worth $4,000 less, they have to send you that check in the
But
mail separate.
now you can get insurance, replacement insurance. If you're driving a vehicle and you want to say, okay, I want a replacement, not what the car is worth. I want a replacement. Well, it's going to cost me to replace it. And you can get that kind of insurance. But most time, if you don't, you get what that car was worth when you had that wreck. Now, I went through a wreck a few years ago, and they depreciated. The insurance didn't want to pay us anything, so they depreciated everything. I had a table saw. What'd you get for that thing? New. I said, $300. They said, okay, how old was it? Well, 5 years. How long does it last? 10 years. Okay, it's worth half that then. You get 150. And I was like, oh, you scoundrels, And they went down that whole list, every single item I had, and depreciated it. And I understand why, but at the time I was like,
So we were still out. But sometimes those things are really good because when we lost our car, when it burned down, we got the amount that we got for the car, and because we had our stuff under our renter's insurance, we got the amount for all of our stuff as well. So it can be good and it can be bad.
right. Well, I understand that.
Buy the insurance you need.
Yeah.
We had this liability, and so that's why they depreciated everything.
Yeah.
And we had the same insurance company as the guy we did it to, and so they were negotiating against themselves.
So, anyway. And I didn't get nothing for the helicopter ride when my truck was upside down in the air like this. You'd think I'd have got a few dollars for that. Anyway. What verse, Phil?
Verse 16.
Okay.
And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his woman. If her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. You shall not suffer a witch to live. Whosoever lies with a beast shall surely be put to death.
Stop for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea of, earlier we were talking about you got a virgin, she's been molested. Now she has to marry that guy unless the father says no, or unless she says no. According to Talmud, she can say no. No, I'm not marrying him. And so now there's a what's the cost of a virgin, blah, 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 and all that. And sometimes I think that's getting taken way out of context, what the intent was. And so then let's look at the next part. It says, anyone who lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. You got Chaim Richmond one time did a survey of the 50 states in America, Chaim Richmond, the Temple Institute, and he said there was 20-something states, this was about 10 years ago, that bestiality wasn't illegal.
Wait, what?
Bestiality wasn't illegal.
Yeah, there's some states in America that still.
There's 20-something states. This was back 10 years ago. I'm not sure what the answer is now. I know it's disgusting, but I'm just saying.
So it's not Arkansas then, right?
So,
I'm just curious.
Google it because God knows what you'll get after.
yeah.
I know, did you?
Yeah, don't even Google it because they'll tell them what will come up on your search engine.
In this town, or is it Little Rock? In Little Rock after dark.
But,
Know that.
Don't do it.
Weird. I won't, ever. I won't even
yeah.
sandwich shop in the daytime now either.
Okay, verse 19.
Verse 19.
Whosoever lies with a beast.
Wait, we're just gonna skip over the sorceress thing?
You should not permit. Okay, let's talk about a sorceress. A witch. Some translate it as witch,
Right there.
sorceress.
It is a
Okay,
weird spot to just throw
think
that.
about this. The Salem witch hunts, the Salem witch trials. That was proven that these two girls didn't like somebody and they started this nonsense. There were so many people put to death. And just because they didn't like somebody. And so, you know, a situation like that, now, first of all, anytime Scripture says somebody's to be put to death, that don't mean you have a right to kill them. They have to go before a court. It has to be a court trial. And only by 2 or by 3 witnesses. Now, let me explain that. So you got a court trial, and all the Levitical cities, from my understanding, had a court of 23. Now, a ancient Israeli court, Hebrew court, was different than our courts today. Today, you got a judge, 12 jurors, and 2 lawyers, fighting back and forth. Back then, you had 23 judges. The judges had both people come in. They had the defendant come in, the person accused, both parties coming in. And they'd ask them so many questions so fast, trying to trip them up, because that's the way you trip people up. You just ask them one question after another, and you just get them going so fast that they would bring both parties in, then have one of them step out, come back in, and they just had they would do this for a long period of time. Now, if those judges were split, 12 and 11, 11 said this person was guilty, 12 said they weren't, that person got off. If 12 said they were guilty, 11 said they weren't, then it's still not a death penalty. A death penalty has to be plus 2. So now, the 23, if we had 13 and 10, 13 says they're guilty, and 10 said they weren't. Now we're plus 2, we have a death penalty. So in an Israeli court, a Hebrew court, they had to have plus 2 for a death penalty. Plus, by the mouth of 2 witnesses or by 3. And so, but a plus 2 court, that's actually 3 is the difference. And so you had to have 2 witnesses, plus you had to have this difference in the court before you could issue a death penalty.
So I actually thought that this, you shouldn't suffer a sorceress to live or whatever, was super out of place. But then I did some digging and found that basically the sorceress, the reason why it's mentioned here is she would use witchcraft to satisfy her lustful desires, basically. That's why it's in this part specifically. Because it looks really out of place. If you're just
We're talking
reading
about a
through.
man enticing a woman and all that right before it.
Right. So I was like, why is this just sitting here like this? That's so weird.
Okay. Let's go down to 19, one who brings offerings to gods.
Whosoever lies with a beast shall surely be put to death. He that sacrifices unto any Elohim, save unto Yah only, he shall be utterly destroyed.
Stop.
Okay.
Okay, so worshiping any other gods, you sacrifice unto other gods. And first of all, you got to have 2 witnesses or 3, generally 3 witnesses. And so you have to go to court. They said, we saw this person making offerings to blah, blah, blah. And then they were found guilty. That's a death penalty. But every single time, there had to be a trial. You never had the right to go out and stone somebody yourself or kill them. How many different ways were there of killing people? According with how many different ways did the court have to kill people? I don't remember them all, but there were 5. 1 is stoning. 1 is hanging. 1 is burning. Now this is the one that got me. Remember a priest's daughter, if she's suspected of adultery, or if she's caught in the act, whatever, that she's to be burnt? Only a priest's daughter, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that was to be burnt. This one that got me, they literally, actually they never said it ever, only if it ever even happened. But Judah said the same. Remember when his daughter-in-law was pregnant and he said, have her burnt? That's how we know she was a priest's daughter. And at that time, the only priest was Shem. So she was from the lineage of Shem, so she knew better. But then she told us it's by Judah. And so anyway, Judah said, oh, she's more righteous than me. But the idea of a priest's daughter being burnt, they said they would literally take hot lead and just pour it down their throat, and they killed them immediately. They weren't like they were staked out on a fire and set on fire. That's not the way they killed them. And there were 2 more, stoning, hanging, burning.
Running through with a sword, that's how
Shot through with an arrow, spear. I think that's all one.
Pincus ran the man and the woman through with the sword.
Yeah. Okay, there were 5 total, though. All right, let's go down to...
Verse 21.
Well, another thing about making offerings to other gods. Now, this is on a spiritual level. Can you give thanks? Okay, first of all, your table is an altar. Do you guys realize that? So when you sit down to eat your food, you're literally sitting down at an altar. Think about that. That's the way Judaism perceives the table. That's why you do the blessing over the food before you eat and all that. So can you imagine now with that concept, sitting down and offering Yohevave, thanks for that big ham sandwich? Think about that for a minute. Now think about what I'm thinking about. So literally, you're making an offering. Anyway, just something to think about. Okay, verse 21, go.
You shall neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any wise, and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry. And my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword, and your women shall be widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people that is poor by you, you shall not be to him as an usurer. What is that word? An usurer, neither shall you lay upon him usury. If you at all take your neighbor's raiment to pledge, you shall deliver it unto him by that the sun goes down. For that is his covering only, it is his raiment for his skin. Wherein shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass when he cries unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. You shall not revile the Elohim, nor curse the ruler of your people.
Stop. Let's go back up to usury. Okay. When you lend money to my people, to the poor person who is with you, do not act toward him as a creditor. Do not lay interest upon him. Usury. What has America become? We quit building things. We quit making things. We become a nation of lending. We started lending our own people in usury and blah, blah, blah. You know, back in the day, the taxes and stuff was, you put taxes on the people you conquered. They didn't tax their own people. And Pharaoh started the whole idea of taxing the dead. And so that's why Egypt, the word Pharaoh actually from Jasher means taxing the dead. And that's kind of who we are in America, we not? 100% we are now. We can't die because we can't afford to die. You know, my kids are going to be out $10,000 to bury me because of the whole system and blah, blah, blah. But my whole point is that Usury, though, is something that's very important to understand is that I would not be in the banking business, period, myself. And I would not invest in the banking business. If I was buying stock, there is no way I would invest in anything that deals with usury because, in effect, you're charging interest to your brothers and sisters.
So, I was reading a commentary about this a year or two ago, and basically Jews consider any money you lend to another Jew and ask for interest, any interest is usury. But they will lend outside of Judaism to Gentiles with the accepted public rate, below the accepted public rate, and that's not considered usury.
Okay?
So the accepted legal interest rate in Arkansas for non-consumers is 6%. Generally, the usury limit is 17% because it is 5% above whatever the Federal Reserve's interest rate is for consumers. So if you're lending above 17%, you're a usurer or you are a loan shark, basically. You're acting like a loan, because that's what loan sharks do. They charge way above the legal lending limit.
I just stay out of the banking business for y'all. Be a lot safer.
So I just thought
And
it was interesting to look at how that applies today. And it's interesting that Jews will lend to each other for nothing, and which is biblical here. I mean, if you look at that, what they're talking about pulling people out of slavery and all, redeeming people. But if they lend to people outside of Judaism, they will charge interest. As long as it's not above the federal lending rate, it's not considered usury.
okay, so years ago, Beth was on this AISH, a society in Israel. They did a lot of tourist stuff, blah, blah, blah. Well, they sent us a letter one time. There was a Jew down in Florida on death row. He killed a park ranger, blah, 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 and they were fixing to execute him. And they sent out this thing all over everybody in America. It was part of AISH, and they wanted to write the Florida governor and stop this execution because he's a Jew. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. He killed this woman. They don't be care what relation she was just because, So what I'm trying to say is that you can't just apply something just because somebody else is a Jew, okay? Who is our brother? My sense is my brother is anybody that's willing to walk in Torah. Now, we got people outside Torah that aren't in Torah yet, but they're still our brothers too. They're going to come this way one day. And I don't want to be responsible for loaning them money in a situation where I'm charging usury, and even though that's inflated usury or whatever you're saying, I'm still saying that it's dangerous. That's a dangerous step because that's what America has done, that we've become a usury nation where all we're doing is loaning.
Well, it tells you what they think about us. I mean, we're not their brother, we're not their family.
Exactly.
They're taking advantage of us.
But where we're different, though, where we have to be different is willing to accept that and say, whatever, that's fine. But my brother is anybody that's willing to step into this, even some that aren't yet, that are going to in the future. Johnny.
Is this, if you take your neighbor's clothes, you're supposed to return it before nighttime? Should we be thinking of Tamar again there? Didn't she take Judah's clothes as a down payment?
And she didn't return it to him. That's a good point.
But he never brought. Well, he did, but she was gone.
Well, but Hashem said next time tomorrow you give her his thing back. He has to have it before dark.
I guess he gave her payment.
Yeah.
Well, he came back and she wasn't there. But it doesn't say when he.
That's a good way of applying it. I never thought about that. That's good, though. Okay. Where we get to? Whoa. We got to talk about this. Yeah. I'm going to read this one more time because y'all don't want to hear this, okay? You shall not revile Elohim, and you shall not curse a leader among your people. Let's talk about that one. We don't want to talk about that, do we? We're all guilty of that one, are we not? Maybe not cursing, but just wanting something just really short of cursing. Okay, so Yodivave, Yah, puts people in power that he intends to do something. And it's the hardest thing in the world for us to accept sometimes when it's going against us because he's destroying the country, blah, 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 whatever. But you got to remember, he's doing it. Now, where I differ from everybody, I'm going to tell you, and some of you are going to say no, but I'm going to tell you to vote, okay? Now, They may steal it. They may steal the election, but they have to steal it. And then, so I'm telling you, don't fall for go ahead and vote. But remember, Yah will put in who he wants to. It will happen.
I don't think you're talking about the leaders they're talking about. They're talking about Moshe and the priesthood, not Joe Biden.
Well, I don't know. No, I disagree.
They weren't talking about
I can prove it. I can prove it.
They raised up against Pharaoh. They had a whole rebellion.
I can prove it. Ahab. Elijah ran before Ahab's chariot. Ahab was a wicked king, very wicked. Did he not? At Mount Carmel. Elijah goes up to Mount Carmel.
Showing off, though.
No. He ran before the chariot because that's what the men did before the chariots of the king. There was 50 before and 50 after. Elijah ran before Ahab's chariot. Showed him honor and respect, whether he liked him or whether he didn't, because he had a wicked wife,
So if
Jezebel.
Biden came here to Russellville, they said, we're doing a parade. We want you to lead the parade.
I can't because I can't walk that fast. I'm going to make up an excuse.
So, this is talking about, like, I believe it's both, honestly. I believe that who it's talking about here is, like, the judges that were put in place over the people, like, God's judges that he put in place, right? Which would be, like, the leaders of that day in Israel.
But it
which would
applies
be,
to
like,
leaders.
the Sanhedrin, basically. And then when they went into slavery, when they went into exile, they had to respect those leaders as well. But it's a both.
You don't think it applied to our leaders?
I definitely think it applies
Oh,
to
okay.
our leaders, but I also think that it applies to, like, what Yeshua said in Matthew 23, like, listen to those on the seat of Moses, right? And is it Exodus 17? Deuteronomy 17. For whatever. But he's talking about the judges as well that are put in place, which would have been like the rabbinic that was put in place at that time. So that's kind of like a double thing.
I agree, and one of the reasons that I agree that it talks about the good leaders and the leaders we don't like is because it says you shall not revile the gods. It doesn't say you shall not revile me, the God.
Yeah.
It says it's small d plural or Elohim, which refers often to
Judges, court.
well, but it also can refer to the fallen angels that were created by Hashem that he allowed to take dominion here, or tried to take dominion here, he has dominion here. And so we have to be careful how we speak about God's creation, period, whether they're good or bad.
So we had a guy here one time, and he said he was upset about something. He said, I think, we're talking about every person had an angel watch over him. He said, I think my angel's retarded. And I was like, oh, dude, don't even know that.
I remember that.
I said, man, you don't even know your time. And he was just, he's a smart aleck. But I was like, dude, I wouldn't even joke about that. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're fixing to find out the hard way, and he did. He found out the really hard way.
Also to add on, David never laid a hand on Saul.
And he could have.
And
He said, I will
he
not.
had many times. But
But that
you're
was
not
a
to
leader
lay your
that
hand.
was put in by
But you're not to lay your hand on his anointed. And Saul was anointed. So
Exactly. That's why you don't. That's a different situation, I think. It's somebody anointed.
Mary, and then right here. Linda, and then right here.
right now, so he had to have been anointed by somebody.
I'm sorry?
I think it also refers to people in your position.
Who are you pointing at?
Your position.
Who are you pointing at?
Because you are a leader. And we are not to come against you.
We'll get back to that.
This always struck me out of that story, the passages relating to David and Saul. And when the prophecy was fulfilled, Saul's sons died that day.
Right.
But then when he learned this, he fell on his own sword. However, the messenger who carried that back to David's like, well, how'd that happen? He's like, I killed him, I got him. And David's like, you're out.
You prophesied your own death.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about what Linda was talking about from perspective. So we had a situation not long ago, and someone said that, well, let's go Matthew 18. You have problems with a brother, you go to that brother or sister, correct? Well, we had a situation where someone said, well, the problem was with an elder, so now you have to step in. I was like, no. Matthew 18, you deal with the situation first before you get anybody else involved. It don't matter if it's an elder or not. Then, if you can't solve the situation between you and the elder, then you bring others in. In that case, you would have to bring another elder. And then, if you couldn't do it that way, then you would bring it before. What I'm trying to say is everything has to go through a process, a legitimate process. And people would be asking me, said, but I need you to step in. I'm like, no, do not get me involved until you've settled all other avenues because I would want you to do me that way. If I offend you, come and talk to me about it. Because I'm going to tell you a little story. We had a guy one time, and I hacked him off. I made him mad, and I didn't know it. And so he called me up one day, and he says, I want to buy you lunch. And I was like, well, okay, cool. So I met him over here in town. We had another elder with him at the time. And this other elder had a lot of money. I think there's more involved in the situation. But he invited me over. So we're sitting there having lunch, and this other guy, and I had a lot of respect for him. I loved him dearly. And so this guy says, you did me wrong. And he caught me off guard. And I was like, what are you talking about? I did you wrong. And so he started telling me when I'd offended him. I said, man, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I said, why didn't you tell me? And at first it bothered me so bad. And then I got thinking about it. Wait a minute. Matthew 18, he should have came to me. He tried to belittle me in front of another man that I had a lot of respect for. And it made me so mad later on that I was like, so I started watching for things like that. And so what I'm trying to say is there's a process. Elders don't get off scot-free. We're held accountable, and believe me, he holds us accountable. When I say something wrong, things go bad. And so he holds me accountable, but you have to too. And so if I offend you, come and talk to me about it. Don't attack me on social media because I may attack right back. And then we really stirred up something. So if I make you mad, please feel free to come and talk to me, and we'll discuss it, and we'll try to figure out what happened and everything. But there is a chain of command. And number one, Matthew 18, that's on our bylaws. If you have a problem with a brother or sister, go deal with it immediately. Now, let's look at it from another perspective. Our leaders.
And wait, before you go on, don't talk to somebody else in the conversation
About the situation.
first either.
That's Lashon Hara.
Never, if you have a problem with a person, don't talk to somebody else about it. Go to that person and say,
Hold on. And with that being said, you don't do this right here. I need you to pray for me because I'm going to have a talk with so-and-so about so-and-so. You just lost it right there. Now, you go say, I need you to pray for me. Why? Just pray for me. I have a situation I need you to pray for. Do not tell me, Connie, pray for me because I'm dealing with this situation. This is what it's about. No, you just tainted. You just tainted my whole perception of what's being said. So, the number one thing is you can ask somebody to pray for them. Say, please pray for me. I got a situation. I can't tell you what it is. I got a serious situation. Pray for me. That's respectable because he knows the answers. He knows what your problems are. But when I try to give you any kind of information at all, then you're only hearing one side of it. You're hearing my side, and there's always two sides to every story, and we're tainting the whole picture before you. And so,
that person you have the problem with, if you went straight to them, they may immediately repent and say, I'm so sorry. I feel really bad about this. Please forgive me.
you just tainted it.
You've already tainted what they look like to the third party that you talk to.
Exactly. Now, right here.
That type of situation is really sticky because it goes a lot deeper than I'm just offended, okay? The most powerful thing that we have as human beings on this earth is influence. The people think it's money, it's fame, it's not, it's influence. And when a person makes a move like that, they deliberately and willfully poison the well or sow the seeds of doubt or whatever. And if you look even farther, they do that to manipulate your free will.
Exactly. Okay, now, one more thing. Our leaders. We have some really wicked leaders. I pray every day for y'all to remove all the evil politicians, every one of them, but I don't know who they are. Now, there's some I don't like, but I really don't know who they are. And so I ask him to literally get rid of them. But I don't go in and, okay, if there's a conspiracy going on, and there's a lot of them going on, if you're part of it, you have a responsibility to bring it out. But if you're not part of it, now we're getting into Lashon Hara. I heard somebody say they were a part of it, and I want to tell you what they said. No. Go check this person out. You might want to know what they said. I can't pass that information on because I wasn't part of it. Now, it's important.
That's how Hitler got away with killing so many
No,
Jews.
I'm not asking that. By all means, if somebody did something and they're reporting something, you come and tell your friends, say, go check them out. You know. The reason I'm saying this is this right here. Yah will bring down the wicked leaders. And he'll use wicked people to bring them down. If he uses me to bring them down, it better be the truth. You follow what I'm saying? I'd rather him use some other person to bring somebody down than me spread a rumor that I wasn't part of, because now, whether it's right or wrong, that's still a Lashon Hara. It's like I'm giving a false testimony. When you're talking about a leader and you're saying, well, this one did this and this one did that, that's a false testimony if you were not involved in it, no matter how you look at it. Now, I'm not taking up for them. I know they're wicked. I know there's a lot of wicked, a lot of corruption, but he's in charge. Just let him do his work, and because, we can spend time talking about prophecy, we can spend time talking about that, or we can spend time talking about Torah, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to talk about Torah and apply it. Right here, and then Linda.
What I learned recently was that evil is usually put in your midst for a reason. It's usually to work out the good in a situation, and because we have quote unquote like evil leaders, it's actually uniting the people in a way, because the people are seeing things aren't adding up. And more people are waking up to that, and it's being used for good, right?
Right.
So
Like the whole
whenever we
pandemic
see,
and everything.
when we see something as evil to us, maybe it's good to somebody else who's waking up now because they see something
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, things are wrong, what's going on? Because I've seen just recently even like more people on the like quote unquote left side see
Exactly.
things, and they're like,
Coming out of that, like,
wait a second.
And that's what did in October 7th in Israel, too. The lefts are starting to wake up. Linda and then Johnny.
Like I say, going back to the spiritual leaders. I always grew up in a household where I never knew there was problems in a church. I didn't either. I mean, I didn't even know until I became an adult that all these people got mad at each other and would leave and do all this.
You thought they moved off?
Yeah, because my mom her saying was, is if you have a problem with the leader, you keep your mouth shut, you talk to him. And one of two things is going to happen. He's going to change you because you've got the problem, or he'll move that person.
Yeah.
And she said, that's how it's solved. Then that way you're not talking about it, you're only talking to him.
Johnny, I agree. There's so many things going on right now. You get so frustrated, you get angry. But you've come a long ways. You told me before, you said, now, before I would have done this. Now I'm calming down, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm not saying that we don't confront these things.
I mean, I want to know, because I want my heart to feel right if there's stuff going on. But, I mean, by this logic, you could never speak about Hamas with confidence, because most of the world will tell you Hamas is good. And then the smallest percentage is saying they're bad. And then you can't stand up there and tell us, like, Hamas is doing this or this, because you're not there and you're not part of it. And that's silly to me when,
I can
like,
see
same
that.
thing with Hitler. Hitler told everybody they're going into those buildings to get showers. And all the people of Germany, they'll tell you their testimony today. They thought those people were going to get showers. But even though in their heart they knew they were never coming out, but they didn't want to speak up against their leader that they trusted with all their heart. And the same thing today. So, I mean, at some point there has
We got to find a happy medium.
there has to be a place where you can be like, look into this.
I agree.
If you see some truth in it, you let me know. But there's nothing we can do. You're not going to rise up against the government. We're still waiting for the Messiah to come back and save us and redeem us.
All I'm saying is there's two sides, so we got to be real careful that we don't step in Lashon Hara. So figure out how to do it without us getting into Lashon Hara. And I know it's going to be, I know.
That's why I asked so many questions about it.
Cindy.
Vengeance is mine, and I will repay, thus saith the Lord.
Okay. One of my favorites is the Kofetz Chaim. The Kofetz Chaim he was a rabbi in the early 1900s, and he was such a gentle guy. And he's on his horse chariot one day. This guy's giving him a ride, and this guy jumps off the wagon to grab something. He's going to steal something out of somebody's garden. And Kofetz says, they're watching. So the guy jumps back up, takes off. Who's watching? You know? And the guy but he was so gentle. He had a store, and because he was a Cohen, everybody wanted to buy off of him. And so he shut his store down by noon every day so they'd have to go buy off the neighbors. The guy the stories about him were just so gentle and so kind. And what I'm trying to say is we got to figure out a happy medium. We got to be gentle, kind, and happy. Conspiracy brings us down. It gets us in that dark mode. We got to be happy, cheerful, but at the same time, you're right. We can't turn a blind eye. We have to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. So I'm not arguing with you. I agree with you. We just got to figure out how to do it where we're not guilty of Lashon Hara. Right here.
So I think the happy medium is pikuach nefesh, preservation of life. Like you would save a life on the Sabbath, regardless of whether it's a Sabbath. So when it comes to Lashon Hara and saving people's lives, you would choose to save their lives over worrying about what you're saying.
But if it's trivial, if it's not something that's going to save a life, then
I think if you're pretty sure that there's people going into like gas chambers,
Yeah.
then you want to say something.
If there's 800,000 children going missing every year somewhere that we need to get a hold of.
Go ahead.
Maybe we can use scripture as a basis on how we look at people. Number one, their fruits tell their character.
Obviously.
Okay? Look at the fruits of our leadership. Okay. What do those fruits tell us?
I think we're learning.
We are to let our yes be yes and our no be no.
Yeah.
We can't have a gray area. There's no gray area in belief. It's either yes or no. So, again, what do people's characters tell about them insofar as their yes and their no on issues based on scripture, not on what James says or Patrick says or Mary says. What does God say?
Right.
So to me, that is, and what Johnny said makes sense because the people were like ostriches during Hitler. They stuck their head in the sand and, oh, everything's fine.
Those aren't gas chambers, they're shower bunkers. They're getting cleaned up.
Where'd they go?
So, just look at World War II and the consequences of pacifism. Not looking at what God says and what she said about preserving life.
And it does say to come out of my people. Like, I have a hard time going and putting my vote down for Moloch or Baal and picking one that both of them seem to be as wicked as can be. I want to come out of it. Like, I don't want any part of it. Like, I get it, like, our desire to think that, like, we're doing something. But I feel like that's exactly what they want you to think, is that you really have some voting power in their worldly game. Like, if we had a choice, we could choose who gets to go run for president. They pick for us who runs, and you pick between their two choices. That's not a choice at all. You know, and then they run the place in the ground for a couple of years and shut you up. So, I mean, that's just my opinion on that. I get it, everybody has different opinions on that, but I just can't participate anymore in my heart. Like, I can't go and say, you know what, I'm going to vote for this evil instead of this evil, and I'm done. Like, I'm not going to vote for any evil. I'm done with it.
The Israelis feel the same way.
They should stop doing it then, and they should change the world to Khan Olam. Like, you change your neighborhood, that neighborhood will change the next neighborhood, and we'll change the world eventually. If we change how we live, we'll change everything.
Okay. Okay, let's get down. We got a chapter and a half. We still got a lot to go. Go, Mary. What verse are we on?
29. You shall
Okay.
not delay to offer the first of your ripe fruits and of your liquors, the firstborn of your sons shall you give unto me. Likewise shall you do with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with his dam. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. And you shall be holy men unto me, neither shall you eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field. You shall cast it to the dogs.
Okay, so it's not saying you offer an animal on the 8th day. It's saying if you have an animal that belongs to Hashem, the festivals are coming up. If it's older than 8 days, then you can take it. So it's not saying you have to offer it on the 8th day. Okay, let's go down to chapter 23. Who wants to read?
Who wants to read?
23?
Do not accept false report. Do not extend your hand with the wicked by venal witness. Do not be follower of the majority for evil. And do not respond to a grievance by yielding to the majority to pervert the law. Do not.
Stop. Both times it says majority. Think about that. You ever seen in the scripture where the majority was right? So when somebody starts trying to say, well, but look at all these people. Yeah, well, okay. Majority has never been right. Okay.
When I see this scenario, I think of a riot. I think of a mob mentality.
Right.
You see those people like back in, the BLM movement, you know what I'm saying? And they didn't even know what they were doing. Like they were just like, hey, let me
Destroy him.
Let me go be part of this because it looks fun.
Yeah.
It looks cool, or I feel like this is a righteous movement. Like they were just becoming part of the mob mentality.
I think you're right. Okay, go. Verse
3. Do not glorify a destitute person in his grievance. If you encounter an ox of your enemy or his donkey wandering, you shall return it to him repeatedly. If you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching under the burden, would you refrain from helping him? You shall help repeatedly with him. Do not prevent the judgment of your destitute person in his grievance. Distance yourself from a false word. Do not execute the innocent or the righteous, for I shall not exonerate the wicked. Do not accept a bribe, for the bribe will blind those who see the corrupt word that are just. Do not oppress a stranger. You know the feelings of a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. 6 years shall you sow your land and gather it in its produce, and in the 7th year you shall leave it unattended and unharvested, and the destitute of your people shall eat, and the wildlife of the field shall eat what is left of them. So shall you do to your vineyard and your olive grove. 6 days shall you accomplish your activities. On the 7th day you shall decease, so that your ox and your donkey may be content, and your maidservant's son and the sojourner may be refreshed. Be careful regarding everything I have said to you. The name of the gods of others you shall not mention, nor shall your mother cause it to be heard. 3 pilgrimage of festivals shall you celebrate for me during the year. You shall observe the festival of Matzos. 7 days shall you eat Matzos, as I have commanded you, at the appointed time of the month of springtime, for in it you left Egypt. You shall not be seen before me empty-handed. And the festival of the harvest of the first fruits of your labor that you sow in the field, and the festival of the ingathering at the close of the year. When you gather in your work from the field, 3 times during the year shall all your menfolk appear before the Lord. Hashem shall not offer the blood of my feast offering upon leavened bread, nor may the fat of my festive offering remain overnight until morning. The choice first fruit of your land shall you bring to the house of Hashem, your God. You shall not cook a kid in the milk of its mother. Behold, I send an angel before you to protect you on the way and to bring you the place that I have made ready.
Stop a minute. 3 festivals. Hag HaMatzah, Festival of Unleavened Bread, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, and Sukkot. Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, these are not festivals. Of course, that's just actually the lamb. Rosh Hashanah is a holy day, but it's not a festival. Yom Kippur is a holy day, but it's not a festival. The festival, there's just 3. And 3 times a year, you're supposed to appear before Hashem and not empty-handed.
Mine, it says the festival of ingathering.
That's Sukkot.
Yeah, I like that. I like how it's
At the end of the year, and which is kind of funny because it's also the beginning of the following year, of the secular year. And so anyways, Hag Matzah, 7 days of unleavened bread, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And Sukkot's actually a festival and then a holy day. Shemini Atzeret is actually, the festival is called Sukkot. Shemini Atzeret is actually a different holy day. Think about that. Because this festival is 7 days long, but this is the 8th day. And so Shemini Atzeret is not actually part of the festival. I mean, it's part of it, just like Pesach is part of unleavened bread, but it's not the festival. And Pesach is just a lamb, and we'll be talking a lot about this going into Passover. Pesach is just a lamb that blood is put on the altar, okay? It's not, we call the whole week Pesach, but it's not. Pesach is nothing but the lamb, and that lamb was put up on the altar. And it's very important because when we start getting to Passover, we're going to talk more about that. Okay, let's go on down now to
21. Beware of him, hearken to his voice, do not rebel against him, for he will not forgive your willful sin. For my name is within him, for if you hearken on his voice and you carry out all that I shall speak, then I shall be enemy of your enemies, and persecute your persecutors. For my angel shall go before you, and bring you to the Amorite, the Hittite, the Prezite, the Canaanite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, and I will annihilate them. Do not prostrate yourself to their gods. Do not worship them, and do not act according to their practices. Rather, you shall tear them apart, and you shall smash their pillars. You shall worship Hashem your God, and he shall bless your bread and your waters, and I shall remove illness from your midst. There shall be no woman who lowes her young or is infertile in your land. I shall fill the number of your days. I shall send my fear before you, and I shall confound the entire people among whom you shall come. And I shall make all your enemies turn the back of the neck to you. I shall send the hornet swarm before you, and it will drive away the Hivite, the among whom you shall come, and I shall make your enemies turn back the Canaanite and the Hittites before you. I shall not drive them away from you in a single year. At least the land became desolate, and the wildlife of the field multiply against you. Little by little shall I drive them away from you until you become fruitful and make the land your heritage. I shall set your border from the sea of reeds to the sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness until the river, for I shall deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you shall drive them away from before you. You shall not seal a covenant with them or their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me, that you will worship their gods, for it will be a trap for you.
Okay, so later on we're going to read about Balaam. And we're going to see that Balaam, he realized he couldn't curse the children of Israel, but he could cause them to curse themselves. And so ever since then, the enemy has realized that he has no power over us except to get us to destroy ourselves, and that's what he does. And so this whole story here, this is one that is kind of interesting when you think about it. Archaeology. Archaeology, what is the concept of archaeology? You dig up stuff, but you even go further than that. A lot of these archaeologists are specialists in the way that these people worship their gods and stuff. So let me ask you a question. If you're walking through Israel and you find a little statue of a pagan god, are you going to pick it up and give it over to the archaeologist? You might want to think twice about that. So anyway, but archaeology, think about it. The purpose of archaeology, what's it for? I mean, A lot of it is to study. And he clearly says you're not going to study these things. You're not going to try to figure out how these people worship their gods. Because he's...
Archaeology, we wouldn't know what those things look like.
That's what I'm saying, though. It's kind of like what me and Johnny was talking about a while ago. Where's the fine line? You understand what I'm saying? There's a fine line in everything we do. There's a...
I think it's about heart posture. What are you trying to gain out of it? Like, what's the purpose of what you're trying to do, and is it a motive that's right in the eyes of Yah?
So you want to buy a new vehicle. You don't have the money to buy it, so now the people are going to finance it so you can get it. They're charging usury, but otherwise you ain't going to get that vehicle. So what I'm trying to say is there's a fine line on everything we do. I'm not telling you not to charge, and not that they can't charge interest. I'm telling you, I'm not going in that business just so there's no mistakes. That's all I'm saying. I'm just going to be real careful in certain areas. And the same thing with archaeology. What do? Do you want to study what they did? Because I'm telling you, when you're walking through Israel, we're down at Caesarea, and we walk down by the water there, and there's stuff everywhere. You're picking up these things that's hundreds of years old, these little clips they took boats to. I think, wasn't that what? You think those were pot shreds? They were some kind of jar handles, but they look like they were mounted to, anyways, they're everywhere. And you can't take them home. You get to the airport, you go to jail for that. You're not allowed to take those things. But they're everywhere. And so it's just, but my point is that, whatever you do, you could do it from a good perspective, but you could also try to figure out how they worship their gods, which is directly violating what he just told us not to do. So we have to be careful. Yeah, we kept Passover for years, and we realized we weren't keeping unleavened bread. We went back to Hebrew. It was like, okay, so we've been bad wrong for a long time.
You have to know your enemy so you can know when he's attacking you.
That's true. You're right. That's true.
So there's a fine line even in that.
Yeah.
And this says, the commentaries say, it's not that you're not supposed to speak the name of these other gods. For example, where it says, where it says, anyway, not to speak the names of other gods. The qualification is outside of study of Torah.
Like Amalek. We're commanded to erase Amalek, but we talk about him every year.
Right. There's a fine line between saying it, it can quickly turn into you worshiping something you shouldn't be worshiping, and so you're only to speak those names when you're studying Torah.
Okay.
It could also be like speaking those names, you're proclaiming what they do. Like if you proclaim the name, your actions and your deeds are what you're proclaiming, basically. So to speak a name of another god, you're proclaiming them, like that you're following them. Basically.
Exactly. Okay.
I would reckon that more to like, I reckon it's more like, oh, don't go in that building, it's on fire. Just because I say to you out loud, it's on fire, doesn't mean that my words set it on fire. I'm telling you, don't do that, it's on fire. And so, like, just saying the name to warn somebody, stay away from that. That's the worship of Baal or Molech or some other evil god that is trying to oppress people. Like, it looks good from here, but when you go, you take a closer look, you'll see that that's an evil powers and principalities working in this world. Stay away from it. I don't think that's a bad. I think we're called to warn each other, and like if you see children listen to music where they're clearly going off track, you let them know like that is clear worship of some other god. And if you don't stop, you're gonna open up doors and stuff, and you have to know what to look for to even hear it. And like you can hear it real clearly now because you've been away from it. But some people don't hear it clearly, and they just think it's fun.
Yeah. Okay, 24. To Moses he said, go up to Yah, you, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall prostrate yourself from a distance. And Moses alone shall approach Yah, but they shall not approach, and the people shall go up with him. Moses came and told the people all the words of Yah and all the ordinances, and the entire people responded with one voice and said, all the words that Yah has spoken we will do. Moses wrote all the 10 words, Moses wrote all the words of Yah. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars for 12 tribes of Israel. He sent the youths of the children of Israel, and they brought up elevation offerings, and they slaughtered bulls to Yah as a peace offering to Yah. Moses took half the blood and placed it in the basins, and half the blood he threw upon the altar. He took the blood of the book of the covenant and read it in the earshot of the people, and they said, everything that Yah has spoken we will do, and we will obey. Now,
That is such an important statement. Everything that Yah has said we will do. Okay, so did they understand all of it at this point? Moses just gave it to them.
no.
Did they know the whys? Did they know the wherefore? Did they know the hows? Not yet. They said, God said it, we'll do it.
So when people make up an excuse, well, but I don't understand that law, it doesn't matter. Do you understand or not? You do it, and then you figure it out. But watch this right here, though. What verse is that? What verse is that? No, I just read verse 7.
It said,
Right. Okay, so 24:7 says, whatever Yah says we will do. How often do we worship Yah? 24/7. Come on, that's good. Moses took the blood and threw it upon the people. I'm sorry.
It's written in Hebrew.
What does it say?
When he had it up on the board, I read it more like, in the Hebrew, I was thinking it was saying more like, whatever we heard, we will do. What we have heard, we will do. I don't know, I'm trying to find the word here. Is it verse 7?
Okay. What do you?
Yeah, it said he read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that you have spoken we shall do.
So in verse 3 it says devar, which is to speak or declare or say. In verse 7, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, here we go.
Lord has said, they're both devar.
Hold on.
The word, I'm looking at the last word says, Benashma.
The Spirit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and we will obey. Okay. Benashma. Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it is related to Shema, which is to hear. It's the same consonant.
Yeah, hear and obey.
The only thing that difference is a tiny bit is the vowel point. You're right. To
Okay.
obey is to hear and do.
Never mind.
Yeah, you're right.
Verse 9. Moshe, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, 70 of the elders of Israel ascended. They saw the Elohim of Israel, and under his feet was the likeness of a sapphire brickwork, and it was like the essence of the heaven in purity. Against the great men of the children of Israel, he did not stretch out his hand. They gazed at Elohim, yet they ate and drank. And it makes you think, it said, no one has seen Yah. And then here it says they gazed at Elohim. So what were they seeing? I mean, it makes you wonder. Yodivave Hashem, Yah said to Moshe, ascend to me to the mountain and remain there, and I shall give you the stone tablets and the teaching and the commandment that I have written to teach them. Moses stood up with Joshua, his servant, and Moses ascended to the mountain of Elohim. To the elders he said, wait for us here until we return to you. Behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a grievance should approach them. Moses ascended the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of Yah rested upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for a 6-day period. He called to Moses on the 7th day from the midst of the cloud. The appearance of the glory of Yah was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop before the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses arrived in the midst of the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay. Questions? Comments? Turn out the lights. The party's over.